My name is Sherry Lynn Johnson Omans, and I'm the sole owner now of the Edelweiss Gallery in Midway, first gallery in town. I was born in Murray, Utah, and I'm an old farm girl. And my dad worked for Murray Smelter for many, many years. And I'm a sibling of 7. So we were hardworking farmers and learned the value of working, hard. And so all my life has been based around hard work, and I feel the integrity of it. I was actually in high school the chairman of the art committee, and I've always had an interest in art, even as a young person. My mother we had meager money, so she had a lot of prints in the house, and I always loved to look at those prints. And so I always had a great love for art. The neighbor kid and I drew all the time, and I think you can tell, children have different talents. And so I kind of focused in life around that, and I excelled in art when I was young. And so when I left Murray, I still pursued my art, and I took from different early Utah artists. Yeah, I moved to Salt Lake and worked for Federal Reserve Bank for years. Before then, I've worked for small banks, in Murray and Midvale, but then I got a job at the Federal Reserve Bank. So I spent a lot of my time downtown with artists and interior decorators, and haunted all the art shops and painted, when I had time. So my husband and I actually met downtown. He worked for Mountain Bell for years, and we crossed paths. A friend knew we were both artists, and he graduated in fine arts from the University of Idaho in Moscow. So that's how we met as artists. In my early years, I never even really dreamed of owning a gallery or pursuing it. I did it mainly because I loved it, not to be rich and famous at it. I think that's the whole secret. I think if you focus on winning awards or being famous at something you're doing, it takes away from your enjoyment, because you become obsessed with making money and being famous. Yeah, I met Dave downtown Salt Lake. He worked for Mountain Bell. I worked for the Federal Reserve Bank. And we both loved art. My friend introduced us because she knew him, and she knew that we both loved the arts. And so we clicked, and we got married. And on weekends, we'd come up to Midway. And as a couple, being married, he had great teachers at the University of Idaho, a woman from New York that came all the way, that was a spinster that had this beautiful old tutor. And he loved architecture, and I love architecture. So we both clicked on the architecture and the art. And so we started fixing up old homes. I think we started with $3,000, and we traded an old trailer. Sold an old trailer and bought our first house and fixed it up. So we did probably in our lifetime 13 homes. Some were new, we built new ones. So when we used to come up to Midway to paint on weekends, and we'd always look for Beloy because we knew Beloy for years. All the Utah artists knew Beloy, and they took from Beloy, if they had a chance. So we came up and always looked for Beloy hiding out, on River Road or something, and he'd hide out in the bushes. He wouldn't paint with the plein air group. It just wasn't his style, So we came up and painted plein air for a long time, and we decided to move to Midway. And we built our log home out on Stringtown Road. And by the way, Dave and I was instrumental in getting the fire hydrants for Stringtown Road because they'd never put them in. They had bought them, but they'd never installed them. I've got great stories on that, but I could go on and on and on. And so we built out there, and as any small community is, they see newcomers coming and they think, we're going to put them on the boosters, couples. And, so we accepted that, and being on the boosters. And, it's a great community service. And so they appointed Dave and I to be beautification chairman, along with, everybody that had their assignments. And so we thought about it, what we were going to do, and we said we need to add flowers to this community and get the old washers and dryers off the porches. We talked to the committee, and it was, they had their different projects. And I said, another thing, there's a Tidy Town Award, and Salt Lake has that award for the large towns one year, larger towns, or the smaller towns the next year. So it was the larger town that year, so it gave us time to talk it over in the committee, and we decided to enter Tidy Town. So Dave and I went down and got the application and brought it back, and we filled it out and signed in, and we had a major cleanup to get the washers and dryers off the porches, and maybe some old farm equipment that was out in the field. Some were cooperative, others weren't. And we had that major cleanup, and everybody, it was free. And so the county came in with their big trucks and hauled it away. And we worked on that because it was a large town that year we applied. We worked on it a good solid year to try to get everybody to plant gardens in their yard, little flowers. And we peeked in the window here when it was a derelict, and there was little boxes hanging off. And so we knocked on the door here, and it was a rental then. And a lady that was a cook at one of the restaurants, she opened the door and we asked her if we could plant those. So we went up and down the street and planted flowers. Everybody cooperated, and I was put in at the same time as the president of the Midway Garden Club. So Lucy Gertz Thompson was the president at the time, and the garden club participated in the beautification. And we got planters for the square. Dave and I went down to Salt Lake, and they had put the big cement planters up and down Main Street, and So they said, you know, we had leftover planters. They're out at the cement plant in Salt Lake. So we went out there and they had probably 20 of them. So we came back and told the council that we had found the planters. So they approved it and that we bought them, I think, for $100 a piece. And Connie Tatton was mayor at the time. And she and I went out on the square and staked out the cement slabs and to bring, you know, these big planters in. And she and I, so all the community came together and came out and helped pour those cement slabs to put those planters on, and the garden club planted those every year in red and white petunias. So it was the Swiss colors, and because each member in the garden club took 2 planters that were willing, they nourished them and they weeded them, they fertilized them, and they hung way down over the side. So anyway, we got the community ready. My friend and I went out as a last ditch effort with a truck to clean up River Road. You know, we went out and picked up trash because we thought as they're coming into Midway, they're going to see all this trash. And Dr. Sweeten had his old tractor and he hauled away a lot of, you know, old things. I mean, it was fantastic, and you know, and then the day that all the beautification people came up from Salt Lake, they were, you know, historians, and Genevieve Folsom wrote for the Salt Lake Tribune. And they wrote an article on Dave and I, and I've got it, and it's terrific. I've got that article back there. And they came and judged the gardens, and Darlene Shelton, some of the old women in Midway had really, you know, gone the extra mile. And so it was really just a great event. And then that same year, we did the Glockenspiel. So I think I gave you an article where all those different things happened. First year for the handbell ringers, and it was Ruth Olson. You remember Ruth. She was the first handbell, you know, ringer. And everybody donated to buy those bells. So on those bells, you know, there's donations from different people in Midway that donated, you know, for the bell. I think the bells are worn out now. They're about ready. But they've been ringing a long time. It's just like our cement planters on the square. They were hit so many times by the city, you know, plowing snow, that they finally just crumbled, you know. But it turned out we had 15 of them, and then as they got damaged, you know, they took them off. But I think it was year before last they completely took them off the square. You know, took out the cement slabs and everything. And Dave and I used to hand water those. I can tell you, we lived out in our log house, and we'd walk up and hand water those out of the creek. And I think it was, who was it? Leo Luke. He did the big, you know, sprinklers on the square. He'd go down and turn them on at night. But a lot of them, you know, if the wind was blowing, it'd blow them off course. So we did that a long time, and Russ Watts happened to come to town. And he saw Dave and I doing that, and he said, that's got to be the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. So he arranged, because he had the know-how and the money to get sprinklers, you know, and to those planters. But the garden club ladies, you know, they, when we won Tidy Town, and we did, the garden club ladies, everybody went down to the awards ceremony in Salt Lake, and of course they presented us with the Tidy Town Award. And we planted it right over by the shelter, right in front. There's a bunch of old Quakies in there now and old bushes. That was the Tidy Town Park. And it had a bench, and it had a big rock, and it had our plaque on it that we won the Tidy Town Award. And all the people from the Salt Lake beautification came up and helped plant that. And it was free because, you know, we had won that. And Gene Probst was there. He was grumbling. And Dr. Sweeten was behind him doing that, which you can edit, because Dr. Sweeten, you know, Gene was a grumbly guy. So that's how it all developed, and I served on the committees, the Planning Commission. After I got off Planning Commission, they put me on the, I was the first architectural club chairman of Midway. And I'm not bragging, this is just history of, you know, what I've done. And then they, you know, we had our architectural meetings all the time and tried to, you know, control what people's signs they could, you know, put on their businesses. And so I've served probably, I don't know how many committees, but mainly we wanted to restore this building. It came up for sale, and the Smiths owned it. And Dr. Sweeten talked us in. He said, you've got to save that building. And Gene Probst wanted to tear it down. He ran the restaurant next door, he and Darlene. He wanted it for parking because he never did have enough parking, you know, back there. And so we bought it, you know, kind of arm twist, because Dave looked at it and he said, I don't want to touch the thing. So anyway, so we bought it, and we had renders in here. It went in from the barber shop to a kind of a dirty rental for quite a while. And every time they turned on the lights, something else went out. So we had to have it commercially plumbed and wired. You know, you can't do that yourself. But we took it on to do it ourselves, and Kay Probst was, like I told you, was the postmaster. And I have to give him credit, because he took the American flag up and he lowered that flag at the post office every night and day. Do you remember that?
I remember him.
He did. He lowered that flag every night and day. And so he came into our gallery. We were working on it. It had black plastic paneling. So behind that was all this mold. And Dave can verify that doing the cannery over there. You know, because it was moldy. So we were trying to figure out what to do, you know, because the mold had eaten into the pot rock. You know, it was pretty bad, and it was smelly. And so we, Kay Probst happened to knock on the door one day, and he came in, and he said, I'm gonna give some advice. Don't sheetrock these walls. He said, that's probably, you know, he said, because the mold will build up behind that. So we had the Dumars brothers, and they were stucco experts. All their children were on their, the father's crew, about 6 of the boys, and they came in and they stuccoed it over the, Eaton Pog Rock. So that was our first. We ripped out sparkle ceilings, big thick pink carpet. Like I said, we found real nasty stuff upstairs. Upstairs. And the floors were rotten, so Dave and I went down and went to a hardware floor. And it was, so we got a grade 3 oak, not an expensive oak. And Dave laid the floors over, the rotten holes or whatever it was. And then we bought the doors for $10 a piece, at a salvage yard in Salt Lake. So it was a labor of love. And, I'm so proud of the building, I really am. And people love this building. And that means a lot to me. I told them the building means more than the art, really. I love the art, but I love the building more. And when my husband got sick, he had cancer for 10 years, he said, run that as long as you can. And, it was the best advice that I've ever had. And I did have it for sale at one time and my house. But I had this harebrained idea. I was going to go to southern Utah and be a painter down there, paint the desert. I love the desert. And one of my favorite artists is Maynard Dixon. He's well known for painting the desert. But that harebrained idea didn't work. So fortunately, I've got my gallery, and I'm 86, and I get up every day out of bed and come down and run the gallery. It's been a blessing. And I think it's kind of a lesson, and I don't know if it's my age, I'm being old and opinionated, but I tell them, you've got to save Midway's history. It's being torn down. They tore Jerry Springer's house down, and they've done a great job. But I think once you lose that history, it's gone forever, so these old houses. So somehow, I think down in Salt Lake, what they're doing right now on preservation is they're making developers, I think they're drawing up an ordinance to make developers preserve whatever historical buildings on the land and incorporate what they're doing around it, And if we'd have done that, I think there's so many buildings they could have worked around. Some of them are beautiful old pop rock buildings. So Dave said at the time, this is kind of how we envision Midway. And we really didn't have a architectural plan at all. We just did it by gum and by gosh. We knocked out walls, and Dave did the sign, and we thought, wow, Bryce Olson did our bell tower for us at a very reasonable cost. And we put the lattice in, the ironworks from Iron Anvil, and they had a lot of salvage material, and so we went out and found material, and they, did our bars. So I thought, that's what can be done. Our committee actually wanted like I said, all the old houses to be preserved on Main Street, picket fences, window boxes. But I think that's going to happen around the square. And I told the fellow that just did Jerry Springer's house, I'm trying to think of his name, I think he serves on the Planning Commission, that our next chance of saving part of history is make sure now that every house that comes up around the square is preserved or made into a little shop. Yeah, we decided because in the gallery, because the rooms were small, you know, it had no viewing space, to knock out that wall, and it was solid pot rock. All it had was the little, you know, little door there. And so you almost had to duck to get under there. You know, like I said, they must have been short. So we found out it wasn't a bearing wall, and so we ripped it out. So anyway, we went to Camas and found the beams. You know, we knocked out the walls, and the wall, there was pot rock standing almost to that ceiling. And went to Camas, found the beams, and they were green. And so we let them sit a while, but they split, you know, because they were green, but it kind of gave them character. Because it was the hair barber shop and concessionary, they had a big hole in the wall, right back there where the painting of the holly, not that wall, but the other wall on the west side. Big hole in the wall, and it was pretty primitive. They hadn't really framed it in. So, you know, they passed food back and forth. They cut hair and passed the food, and they had little ice cream, you know, tables, you know, the old-fashioned ones. And so they had the dances next door, and ladies would come from all over, you know, in horseback and wagons and things with rollers in their hair. You know, these are things I've learned from, you know, different people. And when, you know, when we got it, of course, we sealed that hole off. You know, we had to seal that off. It had a window right in the far back north side, which we sealed in, you know, to give it more wall space, you know, and so it's, you know, it was a labor of love to do this. And there's a crawl space, and Dave was thin, so he could get underneath there. If I tried to get down there, I'd get stuck. You know, so he was tall and thin, so he could slither, you know, underneath. And but all the wiring and plumbing, you know, 34 years ago was redone, and we had to bring it up to code for the city. You know, every time you do something, you know, the city has to approve of it. Yeah, Gene Probst was pretty upset because he, you know, when we bought the building, he owned the rest, Burgermeister, he and Darlene. They were terrific people, really. He was a gruff old guy, you know, and you know that, and being in Midway that long. And so we were progressing, you know, putting on a roof and everything, and Dave and I decided to start painting, you know, the exterior. So we started with the red. He said, "What are you going to do with that old thing?" He said, it's such a sow's ear. He said, you know, what are you going to do? He said, you're not going to be able to do anything. And he said, so he was gruff, you know, and he'd watch us, you know, he'd come out, he did a little yard work out there. And so we were out there painting, and probably a streak that big of red, you know, the first coat of red. And usually when you start painting over, a lighter color, we primed it's bright. So we said, how do you like it, Gene? He was over there. He said, that looks just like a whorehouse. And Dave later, he said, we should have asked him how he knew what they look like. Now that you better edit. After we were done, he watched us, and we actually poured to try to protect the pot rock, which you guys have, are probably going to do, is poured a little foundation up this far. Dave did that, and Gene was watching him. But when we got done, he came over, and we had an old bench in here that was made out of barnwood. And it was beautiful. He wanted that so bad. He said, what do you want with that? How much do you want for that bench, that old bench? And they said, how about $3,000? He said, oh my gosh, I wouldn't pay $3,000 for that. And it was really done by a craftsman. The big seat came out of an old barn. It was a big beam in and all. And he came in and looked around. He said, do you know what? He said, you've made a silk purse out of a sow's ear.